I think your analysis was very straight line. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing funds.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go down that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they were talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD.
I got nothing.
Calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. That's good. I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
Yes,
but
okay,
an
he's good.
erratic
Mikhail
detective is Mikhail Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? Look, girl, how you deal with that? You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
Kingdom, you apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. Hi there, welcome to the Freddie Kissoon Show with my co-host Akash Prasad. Our guest this evening knows no introduction. He is one of Guyana's most accomplished scholars in the field of arts and literature and a very published man. He has retired as professor at the University of Warwick and is currently a fellow at Cambridge University. He is also the head of the Amina Gafu Institute for the Study of Indentureship. He is in Guyana because he was a judge at the recently concluded Guyana Prize for Literature. None other than Professor David Dabydeen is in our studio this evening. David, it is always a pleasure talking to you. I find your thoughts on many things outside of literature very interesting, and I think we're going to ask you to speak to our viewers about what's happening in India with this recent Muslim people being excluded from citizenship, what is happening in London. I don't want you to get into any problem with saying things that I think in London may not be acceptable vis-a-vis what's going on in Gaza. So the last you met Gildari, this is Akash Prasad. He spent a long time in the Guyana Chronicle. So let's start first with a piece of history that I don't think you're aware of. And tell me if you're aware of it when you arrived in this country and you presided over the Guyana Prize in Literature. I think Ian MacDonald may be the oldest man to have won a prestigious prize in literature anywhere in the world. He's 93, and he won the prize in poetry. Your comments?
Well, he won the prize for poetry. I think this must be the third time that he's won the Guyana Prize for poetry. And of course, he's a fine poet. What distinguishes his work is the tremendous empathy for the common people. You know, when you read his book, Mercy Ward, he goes to the hospital and he encounters different people in different stages of suffering. And he writes very movingly and with true sincerity about their lives and their predicaments. He really is a chronicle of the ordinary Guyanese. When I say ordinary, we're all extraordinary. But, you know, the common man or common woman.
But to be writing and being published and winning prizes at 93?
Well, he sent me a note.
It reminds me of Kit Nascimento. They're very active. And they're the same age.
Well, Ian wrote to me, an old friend, obviously. He wrote to me a few years back, 2 years back, and sent me a lot of poems. He said, my veins are bleeding, bleeding ink. So there's this great surge in his final years in terms of his imagination. You know, it's that surge, that final burst of imaginative passion, passionate imagination. And I have a tremendous admiration for what he's doing, because normally you give up writing when you're 70, 60. You know, you relax, but he keeps on pushing the boundaries.
I cannot believe that at 93, Ian MacDonald and Kit Nascimento is as active as anyone in their 70s and 80s. These two people don't stop. But the last time you were here, we talked about a whole set of things, your favorite book by D.H. Lawrence, but we didn't touch much on indentureship. You hold the position of CEO of the Amina Gafur Institute for the Study of Indentureship. Akash has an interest in indentureship, so I let him take over.
Yes. Professor, it's an honor to be sitting here with you. About almost a decade ago, I saw a documentary on BBC titled Coolies, How Britain Reinvented Slavery. And I remember seeing, I watched it, and then I watched it back recently again when I heard that you were coming. And one of the things that struck me was when you found this man Dabydeen, and you saw his name, and then right next on the same page, you saw when he died in 1912, and you said it was a shock to you. But what I would like to get from you, Professor, is in your research, can you share a little bit of what it would have been like for look, a lot of people believe that indentureship was just another form of slavery. Where do you stand on this?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I have been in a privileged position at the university level to have access to documentation and to books. So I acknowledge that privilege that I've had to work on slavery and indentureship. Indentureship, totally different from slavery. In terms of the absolute brutality endured by Africans. They could be beaten at will, they could be killed with impunity. There was no protection for them. They couldn't go back home. There was no return home. And it was unpaid labor. Indentureship was different. It was humiliating. People were far from home. People were hungry. People were also abused in the plantation, but not to the same extent. And there was always the possibility of returning home. And there was a protector of immigrants, even though Crosby was not effective. He was made ineffective by the authorities. So we can compare and contrast anything. Mm-hmm. You can compare a banana to an apple. You know, they're fruits in some way. So the fruits of our labor, slavery and indentureship, are also specific to our different experiences. Now, I was lucky to be sitting in my office one day when I got a phone call. I did that program for the BBC with some other scholars like Bridge Lal, the great Bridge Lal from Fiji, mm-hmm. the pioneer. And I was sitting in my office one day at the University of Warwick when a phone call came through, a very polished and elegant voice, English voice, a woman saying to me, I am the descendant of Theophilus Richmond, who was the ship's doctor, the ship's surgeon, the surgeon on board the first ship to bring Indians from India to Guyana, the Hesperus. Mm-hmm. The Hesperus and the Whitby arrived on the same day. And she said, his name is Theophilus Richmond, and I'm descended from him. And he kept a diary of the journal, of the journey, a very detailed diary. Would you like to look at it? Freddie, you want to fall off your chair? You can't believe this. This is a document that has been not seen since 1838. It's been kept in the attic of Richmond's family. Anyway, we published that. And you realize right away, just by seeing that first-hand account, the humiliation of Indians from day one. You know, shepherded on the boat, eat whatever is fed to them, no sense of religious difference or religious integrity, women separated from men, but women subject to abuse, cholera. As soon as they left Calcutta, cholera broke out and many, many died. So it was traumatic, that Middle Passage, but it was much more traumatic for Africans who were in the hold, right, shackled. One of the famous descriptions of slavery was said this: the slaves lie in 2 rows, one above the other, one beside the other, like books upon a shelf. They are packed so tightly that the shelf could not easily contain one more. I mean, that is real suffering. 3 months, 4 months being chained, and you die and nobody removes your body. No, I'm not interested in the calculus of suffering, but we have to acknowledge the specificities of African suffering.
Definitely.
And humiliation. I have to say that I'm happy to be privileged, Freddie, to be running the Amina Ghafoor Institute for the Study of Indentureship and its legacies, because indentureship, not just, it included, obviously, major Indians, Chinese, Portuguese, some Amerindians were indentured. The whites were the first people to be indentured, the Irish in the 17th century. Thousands of them indentured to the Caribbean and North America. Africans, freed Africans were indentured as well. So indentureship covers all of us. And I'm happy to say that the Amina Ghafoor Institute is moving the subject of indentureship studies from the margins to the center, because now we have a relationship, we have a partnership with the University of Cambridge, which is one of the oldest universities in the world. And the University of Cambridge, working with the Amina Ghafoor Institute, has now set up a 7-year program of visiting fellowships in indentureship studies. And more than that, has set up an annual lecture permanently. Long after I'm dead and Cambridge is still there, this lecture will take place. An annual lecture on indentureship and its legacies.
Wow.
Permanently. Which means that once Cambridge has said that this subject of indentureship is validated, you have to be validated by the authorities, as it were, the subject moves to the center. And that encourages people to do research on what happened after slavery, which is indentureship, and on the relationships between the two forms of labor. So Cambridge has really been... Cambridge University helped to pioneer the ending of indentureship, because Reverend C.F. Andrews, who was Mahatma Gandhi's right-hand man, was sent by Mahatma Gandhi to Guyana, to Trinidad, to Fiji, to Mauritius, and to South Africa to report on indentureship, the condition of the coolies. Mm-hmm. And it was on the basis of his report that Gandhi agitated for the termination of the system of indentureship. So Cambridge had a major role to play in the ending of indentureship. So it's very good now that they're encouraging scholarship in this area.
I'm going to ask you.
And by the way,
yeah, sure.
I'm so delighted that this is done in the name of Amina Ghafoor, because Amina Ghafoor did something extraordinary. She created from scratch a journal, a major peer-reviewed journal, the Arts Journal, which published everybody, not just literary figures, but also art and in general art history. It's a phenomenal achievement, and it ran from 2004 to 2018. And she commissioned, edited, proofread, printed, and distributed the journal all by herself. I mean, she probably had a little bit of help here and there, but I think it's remarkable.
I wonder if our viewers know that's the wife of the famous long-standing Guyanese entrepreneur.
You mean Sattar Ghafoor? Yeah. Well, Sattar is our genius when it comes to business.
Yeah.
Very humble background.
I was about to say that. I know him. And it's two persons I've met, David, that when you see them in a crowd, or if you go in a hospital and you see them sitting down on a bench, you will never believe these are two of the richest men in the Caribbean. That is Nazar Mohammed, which we commonly call Shell in Guyana, and Sattar Gafoor. Sattar Gafoor, which you will just see him sitting on a bench in a public place, and you would not believe that this man is a multi-billionaire. It is a fantastic achievement of these two men, Nazar Mohammed, known as Shell, and Mr. Gafoor, to have this quality to appear as a normal person. But David, I'm going to ask you a question, because I think our viewers looking at someone from the UK being interviewed will obviously want to hear, our viewers will want to hear what's going on in the UK. I will ask you to be careful how you answer this question, because you live in the UK and these programs are being monitored by Western embassies in Guyana or what have you. So I don't want you to say anything, please. And if you think it's too sensitive, we can move on. But given your intellectual heights and you live in the UK, I'd like your thoughts about Gaza. If you want to pass on, that's...
No, I don't want to pass on Gaza. But can I first say why I'm here, in terms of why I'm here in Guyana? For the Literature Prize, the Guyana Literature Prize, which is one of our most important cultural activities. And Charles Ramson has, Minister Ramson, has expanded that tremendously, and we should know about how he's expanded that. It's not just the Guyana Prize for fiction or for poetry and prose and drama. He's expanded that to non-fiction, but more than that, because he has this passion for young people, he's expanded it to 4 prizes. I think 4 prizes for young people, Guyana prizes for young people, girls and boys, right? 1 for prose, 1 for poetry. And women are in a category where they're the best of the girls' writings will get a prize. And he also funds the performance of 2 plays, at least 2 plays a year, at the National the Theatre Guild, which he funds. The winners of the drama prize, instead of it just being a book on a shelf, they're now being performed. So these are tremendous things that are happening. So let's move from that to Gaza. Obviously we have to be very objective. The killing of, well, first of all, let me say I did a radio program many months ago, a couple of years ago for the BBC Radio 4, called Neither There Nor Here, in which I described the Israeli actions in Africa as one of the greatest acts of humanity in the 20th century, when the Israelis removed thousands upon thousands of Jews, falashas from Ethiopia. It was an enormously expensive and complex operation. It really was, right? Because they had to be picked up secretly, and people wanted to impose all kinds of bribes on the Israelis and so on, but they managed to airlift thousands of Ethiopian Jews. That was a great act of humanity. Now it's the reverse. Now we see the reversal, whereby mass killings are taking place using the highest, most complex technology. Babies are starving to death. Imagine, babies are starving to death. Children and women being killed indiscriminately in retaliation for the killing, the murder of innocent Jewish people, 1,300, and also the injuries they endured. The retaliation is absolutely excessive. It is not an eye for an eye. It's 50,000 eyes for one eye. The other thing about Gaza is that it is it's occupied territory. It's a big open prison. I'm not saying this out of bias. It is a big open prison for the Palestinians. You need permission to leave. You need permission to get back in. 2 separate laws apply. It's an apartheid system. There's 2 separate laws apply. There's one law the Ottoman law, which governs the Palestinians, and for the Jewish settlers, the illegal settlers, the Israeli laws, which are much more lenient. There are roads in Gaza where Palestinians can't go because that's taken over by the Israeli settlers. What is that? That is apartheid, and we have to call it out.
You're not going to get into any trouble saying
no,
that. There's strange things going on.
I'm speaking as a writer, and actually not even as a writer, as a human being. We're all appalled by mass killings, right? Now, Jewish philosophers like Chomsky and before Chomsky, Leibowitz, who was a scientist and philosopher, died in 1994. They used, not me, they used a really provocative term to describe how the Israeli Jews, how the state of Israel is dealing with Palestinians. They say that they use the term Judeo-Nazism. Can you imagine? They're saying...
That sounds like a contradiction in terms, but...
Well, they're saying, not me, not you, but Jewish intellectuals themselves, and now that term is being widely used in Israel by Jews themselves, by radical and liberal Jews, Judeo-Nazism, meaning that the Jews are behaving like Nazis in terms of mass killings, in terms of indiscriminate killings. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it is... That term is frightening, isn't it? Judeo-Nazism. It is not my term or your term. It's an Israeli term.
One of the world's leading professors.
Yeah, Chomsky. I think Chomsky is the most quoted professor, most cited professor in the world, right? So what's going on is something in Britain. The political parties have fudged and talked about, walked around the whole business of a permanent ceasefire and a two-state solution.
I couldn't believe Starmer would have opposed that.
Well,
Labour?
Yeah, I don't quite understand it, and I've not looked closely into the Labour Party position because I am myself a Labour Party supporter. Yes.
Isn't Lamy Guyanese?
Yes, of course he is.
He's the deputy leader.
He's the Under Secretary of State, the shadow Under Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, and Lamy is a decent and active politician.
You would know him to speak very intimately too, right?
Well, I meet him whenever he is free to meet. I met him 3 or 4 times. Met him a few months ago, and he's very.
Well, over the years, you would have met him.
Yes, of course, yes. But what is happening in Britain now is simple. This year, the Tory party will have lost the election. Yeah. That is almost certain. Yeah. So they are history now. Mm-hmm. All the nasties that control the Ministry of Home Affairs, Priti Patel and
Suella
Braverman, right? They're history, and hopefully we'll have a nice new clean government with and a certain kind of optimism about British politics will resume. So we're looking forward to the end of the Tory rule, not out of malice, but because they've messed it up. They've had 4 prime ministers, 3 chancellors of the exchequers in 4 years. Johnson gone, this one gone, that one. You never know who's prime minister. And now we have a very respected prime minister at the moment, but unfortunately he will lose the election.
I read
Sunak is liked by many people, on the left as well as on the right.
But he's in a boiling cauldron. His party
will lose, and that is the end of him in the sense of being a politician. He may even lose a seat, you know, but he has about £700 million. Which he worked for. It's not something he inherited. His wife worked for that. Her father was a big magnate in India.
His mother-in-law is now an Indian member of parliament.
Yeah, yes. A very distinguished family. And Sunak actually worked for his privileges. His parents had a pharmacy, you know, so he didn't come up from the top. he didn't start at the top. He started like many of us, you know, in the bottom or the middle.
But why, anyway, how did David, before I go to, I have never seen an American politics is shambolic with horrible people, horrible Congress, horrible senators. But Suella Braverman and the things she said, you would expect that coming from a U.S. Republican senator.
Well, from a
not a woman whose parents are from India.
No, it's really shocking that somebody who owes their existence to
immigrant status,
who's of immigrant status, should behave so odiously to immigrants seeking refuge, people seeking refuge in Britain. Obviously, we understand the arguments that there must be legal methods of coming into Britain, and that the country is nervous about maybe a huge influx of migrants, boat people, but actually the numbers are very small. The numbers of boat people, refugees coming to Britain, crossing the sea, is very small compared to legal migration. So where Braverman comes from, I don't know the woman, I don't know the person. We just know she's somebody we don't want to know. Yes, and I speak for myself, but I speak for many of all of my friends, all my academic colleagues. We feel the same about her. She's a disgrace to British politics, and she's given people of colour a bad name. People of colour is the term we use in Britain. Because they see her and they see the image of somebody vicious. Now, she herself may be a kindly person in private. You understand?
But who cares about that? It's a policy output.
But it's her persona and her policy output, yes?
One of the questions I really wanted to ask, and I'm happy that you mentioned about this journal that you did this, because I wanted to know a little bit about the about some of the conditions and that were the indentured laborers faced on the boat, on the ships as they were coming.
Yeah.
And having to go through the Kalapani and then coming to Guyana, some place totally different, and having to make a life, not just a living. Can you share some of that? I know it must be horrific what they went through, what was probably written in that journal as they were coming through on that boat. But as Mr. Kissoon always says, history is being recorded on these shows, and I'm sure our viewers also want to hear.
Well, there is enough literature out there if people really want to know about indentureship. But what can I tell you? It was, the British did not ship Indians to the Caribbean out of kindness. These people were money. They were there for money. In the same way that the British in the 19th century, and by the way, I live in Britain, and I'm glad I live in Britain for many reasons. A place of law, the police are not armed, people are by and large very tolerant to very tolerant, excellent universities, good health system, even though it's sometimes totters, right? So I'm really happy in Britain. I'm privileged to live in Britain, but I still acknowledge the history of it. Imagine in the 19th century, my new novel is about this. Imagine in the 19th century, the British in India took over very rich agricultural land to grow opium, to grow poppies to make opium, as a result of which there was starvation in India, because the best land was to grow opium and not to grow food for the people. Then the British took the opium and went to China and forced the Chinese to buy the opium. So all the Chinese are now doped up, right? And then the British take the tea, the Chinese tea, and Chinese tea is absolutely superb. Yeah. The best tea in the world. They take it to Britain. And in the 19th century, tea was precious. People used to lock their tea up. There's certain instruments where you lock your tea. It's very precious, right? So thief man don't come and get your tea, right?
You still got your Guyanese thing, thief man.
So that was that is how we did business in the 19th century. We traded people, we traded opium. We went to war. The British went to 2 wars with the Chinese. The Chinese emperor said, look, we don't want your opium. And so the British invaded, and the Chinese lost both opium wars, right? And the Chinese were forced into humiliation. They had to become Christian. They had to. The emperor his status was diminished, and so on. So that is how it worked in the 19th century. Indentureship was part of that. We were just goods, you know. But what we did was to make good. Right. From being goods we made good. Within 5 years or 10 years, we could own a piece of land. You had to buy it, or you have it in return for not going back home. So once you have a piece of land, which is what my great-grandfather had, and no doubt yours, you have your one cow. And then you milk your cow, and before you know, you got 2 cows, you sell your milk, you go and catch fish, you're free. You have your own land, which is very important because most of us were from the lower castes. We were chamars and untouchables. And you cannot own land in China, in India, if you're of a certain caste, right? So coming to Guyana, in a sense, was liberation.
I believe so too.
Yes, it was liberation. In India, you were subject to moneylenders. You had to pawn your wife, your daughter, and her daughter to the moneylender. When you're a low caste, you might as well be dead. Wow. You know? If you're an untouchable walking in a shadow, you couldn't walk in a shadow of a Brahmin. You couldn't even walk in a shadow of a Brahmin, and you could be killed at any time. You know, so all of that religious animosity was rife. When you got in that boat, who cared whether you're Muslim or Hindu? Right away, the Hindus and Muslims realized that they were in the same boat. You had to eat the same food.
Jahaji Bhai.
You became Jahaji Bhai, your boat brother and boat sister, right? So those were the unforeseen and unplanned positivities in the indentureship system. So we took advantage of our predicament to forge relationships with each other on the boat. And we became boat brothers and boat sisters, you know. And then when we came to Guyana, we continued to work and to accumulate and to save. You know, you bind your belly, you know, and you save for your children.
You still got your Guyanese thing, you bind your belly.
I mean,
you
man.
Thief man.
I grew up here, right? People call me a Pagli sometimes. Right?
Well, you know, I've met so many people, you don't have any accent at all. You don't have an accent.
I don't know. I don't.
There's a slight.
You think so? I think if you're sitting in a rum shop chatting with people and people passing and, you know, doing their own thing, they wouldn't know you lived donkey years in
England. Yeah, no.
But perhaps what would happen is that a shot of rum may revive the Guyanese.
He doesn't have.
No, but Freddie, my first book was called Slave Song, and it was written in Guyanese Creole.
I read it.
Yeah. Walk, nothing but walk, morning, noon, and night, nothing but walk. Bukaron me, well, I can't say what Bukaron.
Yes.
Bukaron me picnic, you know? I said, Bukaron me patty cake, Bukaron me picnic. These are women complaining, cussing up Buka, right?
David Dabydeen, I read it, the language.
So to me, the Creole language has a tremendous facility for raw expression.
Yeah, I read your books, David. The one is
no.
Particular one there that is not for the faint-hearted. One of your books is not for the faint-hearted, David. Conservative people wouldn't like it. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I'm not quite sure, but you know, yeah, I can imagine, I could guess, yeah.
Yeah, I know you can guess. But David,
you were talking earlier about before we started the program about a phrase being banned in England.
David, I don't want to go there. I don't want you to get into trouble.
No, let me comment on that.
No, listen. you are a resident of Britain. The British community minister is making a series of regulations that by the time you go back, I think it will be implemented. And you cannot say certain phrases and words. One of which I am not going to pronounce here because I don't want to get you into any trouble.
No. I mean, I always get into trouble anyway.
But please don't repeat. Please don't repeat what
right.
I am going to say.
No.
According to the regulations, it's extremist and you're likely to get into trouble to say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That the community minister, that is being now regulated. Please don't repeat the statement here.
Yeah. Well, let me say in response to your sensitivities that I believe in censorship in terms of hate speech. Any speech that provokes hate must be made illegal. But on the other hand, only if it provokes hate and violence. If it provokes violence, not hate, because you're free to hate anybody. But if it provokes violence, that any phrase should be censored. That particular phrase you mentioned, to me, is harmless. And I would be happy to repeat.
No. Please don't repeat that. These programs are being monitored.
Yeah,
These programs are being
that
monitored.
particular phrase I find innocuous. I can see how certain people can take that phrase and use it against Jewish people, which is what they do. But to me, if it is a call for Palestinian freedom, which also recognizes the rights of the absolute right of Israel to exist, then I don't see the need for that censorship. And you know what? Nobody's gonna. We will all break the law.
Well, I don't.
All writers will break the law. Right?
We can say it in Guyana, ladies and gentlemen, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. David Dabydeen is an esteemed professor and lives in the UK. There are regulations that say that statement is extreme. So
but
let's move on.
Without repeating that phrase, you could also replace Palestinians with Israelis. Israelis should be free as well, from the river to the sea.
Just please be careful. These programs are being monitored. But you didn't say it. But what is you're writing like hell? What is your next book on? Oh, no, I have to stop there. You were responding to him, and you were talking about the bad days of India and religious animosity. David, last week, the Indian government implemented a 2019 law. Those who sought refuge in India after 2014 from any country will now be granted citizenship, except those who, when they came, they were Muslim. It's a horrible thing. So if they're saying, if you came from Myanmar, Bangladesh, Pakistan, whatever, if you flee and you came into India, you will now be given citizenship. Now presently be given citizenship. But you have to be Parsi, Christian, Baha'i, but you can't be Muslim. I think Modi is embarrassing himself on the world stage. That is racism. That's religious bigotry. David?
Well, my view is simple, which is refugees, irrespective of their color, their caste, their religion, their sexuality, their gender, they're refugees.
Yeah.
You have to, out of human compassion and international law, accept refugees. So I can't see how you can include that bias in judging refugees. I can't understand why, if you're a Muslim and you're a refugee, why you can't be allowed to enter India. I don't understand it, except that there is this view, certainly in Britain, that the party in power, the BJP, is anti-Muslim.
I believe Modi is anti-Muslim. I believe Narendra Modi is anti-Muslim.
There's that widespread view, opinion, that something mischievous, to understate, is going on in India with regard to anti-Muslim sentiments. I have not experienced it, and I've not been to India for a while. So I'm just reflecting.
You're not Muslim, so.
Partly, I have Muslim family, My brother is called Ali, Yes.
But they would know that in India to discriminate you. David Dabydeen. They don't know what is Dabydeen. It's not a typical Hindu word.
I don't know what it is. But no, I mean, India has survived centuries and centuries of all kinds of oppressive changes. It has survived. I remember when I was in India saying to a fisherman, I went to see Vasco da Gama where he landed, and I urinated close to the, because there's no public toilets. There's no open, you have to urinate. So I urinated next to Vasco da Gama's monument. And I apologized to a fisherman because he may have been Catholic and he may have been somebody who respected Vasco da Gama, who was a crook and a, imperialist. But he said to me, listen, these people come and they go. He said the dogs remain. So Modi will go, we'll all go. He will go, and I hope that India will restore itself to its international reputation for being the largest democracy in the world.
Akash?
Professor, I would like to know, when you look at the Indians that came, the indentured laborers that came here to Guyana, that group, they were able to preserve their culture and their religious identity, where many others were not able to do so. How is it that they were able to do so? And to keep that rich, when you look at the clothing and the music and the way of worship and all of that, they were really able to keep it and in the face of colonialism and bombardment of becoming Christians.
Well, the Africans, that was beaten out of them.
Yes.
Their native religions were beaten out of them, banned. Certain drumming practices were banned and so on. We know that. The Indians, by the time they arrived in 1838, they had a greater degree of protection. In 1820, in the 1820s, there was somebody called Protector of Slaves, because of the abolition movement being very strong. In the 1830s, when the Indians came, there was Protector of Immigrants. So that is one thing. We had a greater degree of protection than the Africans, right? Because although there was a protector of slaves, officially a protector of slaves, there was no protection really, It's on paper, but at least it was on paper. Now, the second thing, why we were able to preserve aspects of our culture, religion and so on, is because the proselytizers, the missionaries, failed to convert us, except to Presbyterianism. But we resisted the missionaries, and they gave up. They still control the schools, and you still have to have a Christian name to go to school. So you'd have something like Frank Anamantadu or something, but they couldn't get the Indians to surrender their religion and their food and their culture and their cultural practices, and they gave up. That was part of the resistance put up by the Indians. And by the way, I think today is the 13th. It's the anniversary in 1913 of the killing of 15 Indian workers in Rose Hall in 1913 who were protesting against the colonial powers. And I think 40-something were injured, including one amputee. So today is a very, we went through that as well. We went through people killing us. And the Enmore martyrs. But this was in 1913 in Rose Hall. The first big slaughter of Indians. Check it out. Check it out. So we resisted. We had to learn English. And gradually we lost Bhojpuri. Because you had to learn English. Because when the white man says, go and fetch my umbrella, you can't give him a glass of water. He'll beat you in the head, right? So we lost, but we also retained. And we also, don't forget, we also creolized our cultural practices and our food. Because we shared a culture with the Africans. We keep forgetting that we are creolized Indians, And the Africans are Indianized Africans. Not just in diet, but in sport You know, we play together, we eat together, we change our foods, we modify our foods. There's fusion going on, right?
Cook-up rice is not originated from the Africans in Guyana?
I would imagine, yeah.
Because that's my second favorite dish after darling rice.
Tomorrow I'm eating cook-up rice and pigtail.
Yeah.
Whether
Indians like that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Indians like that.
Yeah. And black pudding.
Yeah. Indians, look.
I love black pudding.
Look, West Indian, Guyanese Indians are West Indians. They've kept their Islamic and Hindu thing, but they cook up with their pigtail.
Yeah.
I could tell you this, David. Darling rice and saltfish is what we grew up on.
Yeah.
And I like saltfish and stuff.
Yeah. Saltfish and bake.
David Dabydeen, I have that in my home in the fridge.
Right.
3 packets of saltfish. But David, your new book.
Yes.
What is that about?
I spent 5 years in China, and I felt inspired enough to try to attempt to write about China. So this is my new novel called Sweet Li Ji. It's set in China.
That's the name, Sweet Li Ji.
Sweet Li Ji. Li Ji is a girl's name.
Oh.
And it's about village life in China. Because I went to a village where we all came from, Chinese Guyanese, in Guangdong. Practically everybody there had some person who'd come to Guyana, and they're still coming, right? So this is an attempt to describe Chinese village life in the 19th century, the tremendous suffering, the invasions, the humiliations that they encountered because they were being invaded by the British and the French and the Germans. And then I bring some of them, they flee, they're refugees, they flee to Guyana. So I have Chinese characters in Guyana looking at Guyana, the Indians and the Africans through Chinese eyes, and trying to understand the Guyanese history through Chinese eyes.
Can I interrupt you before you continue? I'd like to hear more of the book. The cover is a Chinese girl. The cover.
I've not seen the cover design yet.
But because wouldn't you find a publisher in China? It will interest you.
No. I was in China in January to meet. One of my novels was published in Mandarin a few years back, and published in China. So this time there will be a Mandarin publication in China.
Okay. So,
but that will take a year. But the book is coming out this year.
What's her name again?
Li Ji, Lijie.
Sweet Li Ji.
Yeah.
Tell us about what Li Ji. The end of the book. What happened to Li Ji?
The protagonist, the Chinese man who comes to Guyana, hears that his girlfriend, Sweet Li Ji, there's rumors that she'd come to Guyana and she drowned. So he hurries back home because he doesn't believe. He hurries back to go and meet her. And as he's joining the boat to go and meet her, she's actually coming to Guyana. Just like boats, the phrase, boats sailing past each other. So it has a kind of a poignant ending. But I really relish the writing of it. Writing was very difficult because you come with a pen and I write by hand and you have a blank page. I know exactly how many words fit in that page. Just on 487 words, maybe you can squeeze in one more word, right?
I'm going to review Sweet Li Ji.
It's got 37 lines and you sit down for 3 hours and you have to fill that page up. I never do 500. I only do one page and then I leave it for the day.
You haven't set yourself yet on the cover design?
No. You can suggest.
But what about a sweet Chinese woman?
Quite possibly, yeah. Probably a 19th century print or painting.
Yeah. I'm seeing this Chinese girl, pretty girl with an umbrella and a nice pink dress with some flowers.
Are you?
Yeah.
That might be too romantic.
Sweet Li Ji.
Yeah, she's called sweet not because she's a sweet girl. She's called sweet because
she's just naturally
no, because her mother
saccharine.
No, because she's full of trauma. Her father was murdered by the Japanese, and so she's full of trauma, and her mother wants to encourage her to come out of her trauma, and so the mother calls her Sweet Li Ji.
That you have to have you have to get a marketing agent in Beijing. Because it's a book about China too.
No, the first book I did in China, because I was the ambassador, I didn't sign contracts or take any money because this was a gift. This was a gift to the Chinese. When you meet Chinese officials, as a Guyanese, you should give them a gift. People give gifts in China. Yeah. So what can I do? I can't give them rum. It's not very respectful. And I didn't have any carvings or anything, calabash or whatever, you know. Yeah. So you give them the book in Mandarin, and they think you've made an effort to communicate. Hmm? Yeah. So the second book will be probably the same, you know.
Okay. Akash?
Look, Professor, the future of Guyana, the trajectory that we're on right now is, you know, we seem unstoppable right now. Where do you see us in let's say 5 to 10 years? And also, if anything is going to stop us, what do you think that might be?
Well, this is a large question, so I'll just focus on one aspect.
Yes.
One aspect. Minister Frank Anthony, I've already told you how Minister Ramson has expanded the literary landscape of Guyana. In health, I met Minister Frank Anthony recently, my friend, and he is building 13 new hospitals. 13. He showed me the plans and the models. Mm-hmm. 13 new hospitals. That's amazing. That is unprecedented in the history of Guyana. I'll just give you one example of progress. Oil and gas, possibility of slashing electricity costs and energy costs. We are actually on the brink of being El Dorado. We came to Guyana, when the British came, there's Walter Raleigh legend about the place being full of gold. It was full of malaria, right? Now we're in the brink of something transformative. And I have to say, without prejudice, that I have a tremendous admiration for the gentleness of Ali, President Ali. I mean, he doesn't shout. I saw him on television the other day talking about Gaza, talking about Haiti, and then the British interviewed him, and the British were very rude.
We saw
interviewing him, and he was very calm. And he said, "No, I don't want your palace. You keep your palace. Yeah. We want some reparations." Yeah. He shamed the man, you know. So I like that strength and also that quietness. Now, if we have that at the leadership level, I think the promise that we all entertain in our hearts can be fulfilled. So I'm an optimist, right?
Indeed.
And I see the 13 hospitals going up, and I know something real is going on. And you know, the other thing, you can be living in a remote village in the interior, and you can still have access to the best healthcare, because there are these clinics that they have where you don't have to go too far. You can have chest X-ray, you can have blood tests, and which is transmitted by satellite to medical facilities in Georgetown. These things are going on in the Ministry of Health. I'll just give you one example that are astonishing, where the technology, the latest technology is being employed. State-of-the-art technology.
Yes. Well, the Georgetown Hospital are doing surgeries that we could not even dream of a year ago.
There is now a hip
replacement,
and it's free. What about our people? What about our people? People say that yes, by 2028 there's going to be a whopping petrol dollars coming in. We're going to be a petrol state. Is this going to attenuate whatever suspicions by 2030? Are we going to leave that world behind of cultural and racial suspicion?
I'll answer that scientifically, but let me answer it in another way. We all know our countries in the Caribbean as being we're in a bag and we're all crabs. Yes, you know the crab in the barrel metaphor, which is not just Guyanese. You try to move up and somebody will try to pull you down. If I give you a grant of $50,000 to buy school uniform, you want 60. You know, we have this, and this is inherited from slavery and abolition, where we didn't really have self-respect and respect for each other. It doesn't matter what you do in this country, whatever creative and positive things you do, there will be somebody to drag you down or to speak pejoratively about you.
Human nature?
It may be specific to certain experiences. I've mentioned slavery and indentureship. It may be, I don't know, I'm not a psychologist. But let me speak scientifically now. There is a very strong possibility that there will be a big artificial intelligence, AI biotech company setting up in Guyana. Big, right? Which will increase our scientific profile resources by 10 million %. Because we're bringing AI and biotech to here. Now, why is that important? Because I said to the billionaire owner, why are you coming to Guyana to invest all this money? He said, what you have is absolutely rich in terms of biogenetics. Absolutely rich. I said, what do you mean? He said, hey, there you have 5 or 6 ethnic groups living together for hundreds of years in close proximity and intermarrying. He said there are very, 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 very few countries where you have that scenario. He said in terms of your genetic history and your biology, you're really rich, you're really wealthy, that you have this togetherness, and that we can make certain pharmaceutical drugs just studying your genes. Wow. And how so we can personalize the medicine. We can create new pharmaceuticals for cancer treatments and all kinds of treatments based on the richness of your biodiversity, your biogenetics. Isn't that amazing? To say, here we are cussing up each other, when actually we're very rich being together scientifically. And I'm also happy to say that 18%, if not more, of our Guyanese people are of mixed heritage. Am I right? 18% or more?
I think it's 20.
20%. That is the future as well.
You have written a lot. You have made a name for yourself. You are responsible for the Isu Prasad Study Institute.
Isu Prasad Center for Caribbean Studies.
At Warwick University. You're now a fellow at Cambridge. You've written a lot. You've won the Guyana Prize a few times. Before we close, you're thinking of writing your memoir?
No.
Oh,
no. I'm not really interested in memoirs. No. I mean, I've written some little pieces here and there, but
about your life.
I've written a short 4 pages, but that's about
4 pages. That's not.
That's maybe 5 pages. Yeah.
So why you don't want to?
No, because your writing speaks for itself. You know, I am my writing. Yeah.
You're from. I think we asked you the last time. You're from Berbice, right?
Yes, Brighton Village.
Have you visited since you?
Yes,
it was named after Brighton.
Yeah, Brighton, England.
It was named after.
Yes, it was. Yeah, yeah. I visited. I went to see the grave of my grandfather and his brother, and
it's there. It's preserved. It's there.
Well, it's a graveyard. You have to go through mud if it's muddy and whatever, but the graves are there, and you go and you say a few words. Yes.
And what about your parents?
My mother is alive, and she's 87.
She's in the UK?
Yeah, she doesn't live too far from me. And she's still got her brain, but you know, when you're 87, you get frail and sometimes you lose it a bit, right? So no, I'm not interested in memoirs. I wouldn't know how to start it, you know.
You visited your father's grave?
No, he died in Canada.
Oh, he died in Canada.
Yeah. But then we all, you know, we're all on the brink of...
So we in the coming years, we're going to see you visiting often. You're not going to forsake Guyana.
Well, I've been since the restoration of democracy in 1992. I come back at least twice a year.
That's good.
Easily twice a year.
Yes, since 1992.
Since 1992, yes.
Yeah.
Because Chetty Jagan made me his ambassador at large and sent me to UNESCO.
Yeah, you were ambassador to UNESCO. You were.
I negotiated with him. He said it's only $1 a year. I said, can I have a US dollar? He said, no, it has to be a Guyana dollar. It's $1 a year diplomacy, which I did for about 17 years.
if you offered to serve Guyana, which will take you away from considerable time from your home in UK, would you accept it?
I've not.
You haven't contemplated?
No, I mean, obviously, if anything is offered or anything is available or anything is needed, and I can be of any use, that's fine. I'm doing some work for Guyana at the moment, not paid. The president wants to beautify the country, and by the way, and so there's a walkway, Lamaha Street walkway, which he needs curators to come and set up posters so that when people walk along, they can read the history of Guyana, captions and so on. I went to visit the seawall, the Kingston, what is it called? The Kingston. Esplanade. My God, is that stupendous or what? I couldn't believe I was in Guyana. It's beautiful, you know, and I see people, young people, children. It's just a wonderful space that recognizes our humanity, and I need to sit down in peace and watch the sea, you know. Bins everywhere, so we don't have to chuck plastic everywhere, you know.
Well, it's
amazing.
We're going to end on the note of the mighty Atlantic that you just visited. Is there anything mighty that you want to say in closing?
No, I'm just really pleased, being a literary person, that the literature festival exists, and the literature prize has been resumed, and there's focus on children, young people's writing.
Well, I know you have a young son waiting outside the studio for you and him to go where you have to go to. So on that note, David, it is always interesting talking to a great Guyanese scholar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Our guest this evening was accomplished scholar that need no introduction, Professor David Dabydeen. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye. Catch you later.